the Tennessee state legislature is proposing a bill that will allow fathers, in the event if a woman that they have impregnated and they suspect that that woman is going to have an abortion, that the fathers can seek to get a petition or an injunction to prevent the woman from getting the abortion to preserve the life of the unborn child. Now, this bill that was proposed by the Tennessee state legislature by Republican state senators, there will be no exemptions in this bill in the case of rape or incest, just to throw that out there, not condoning or supporting either action, but just to put out all the facts. And you can go and Google and look up articles about this and read into detail on it for yourselves. So to my challenge is to black men in these spaces, we've heard black men talking about wanting to get the laws changed to use it towards our advantage. And the way that things go in the United States is that usually these things take place at the local level first before it gets up into the federal level. So, as the saying goes, all politics is local. You're going to have to get these things done locally first before it even becomes something at the federal or the national level. So will black men support, particularly if you live in the state of Tennessee, will black men support these two Tennessee state senators in this matter? And as it is likely to be in the rest of the states, will black men on this issue work with your state or your local Republican Party, GOP, to see policies like this be introduced and to be passed? Now, once again, if you do your own due diligence and if you read articles on this matter, similar bills like these, giving men or other individuals the right to petition or have some kind of injunction to prevent women from getting abortions, have been struck down by courts already. Also, if you have been paying attention to this fight that has been taking place over the past few years, a number of other attempts to limit or restrict the access of abortion for women that have been brought forward by a number of states have been struck down by courts as well. Not all of those measures, but a number of those measures have. Now, I will say this. This was prior to the current makeup of the Supreme Court. A lot of this was obviously prior to Amy Coney Barrett, but even a number of these measures were prior to Brett Kavanaugh as well as Neil Gorsuch. A lot of these measures were prior to the Trump judges that Trump has appointed and have been confirmed by the United States Senate. So though it appears that on the federal level at the Supreme Court, we have a conservative majority on the court, this is now the time to test it. Let us test the Supreme Court and let us test this supposed conservative majority on the Supreme Court, the highest court in the land. Will black men step up and do the work in your local areas, in your states, working with pro-life groups, Republicans and conservatives? And I must mention, there are Democrat pro-life groups. There are various different religious or spiritual pro-life groups. It's not all Republicans or conservative politically. There's other factions that are pro-life as well. So whoever these groups may be within your local area, will black men step up and work with these pro-life groups and pro-life efforts to restrict abortion and to allow men that in the event if a woman somehow becomes impregnated, that the male or family members can have some kind of a injunction or a petition to prevent these women from simply going out and having abortions on their own, and get some kind of a court order to preserve the life of the child. And now, in this particular proposal in the state of Tennessee, in the event if a woman goes off anyway, let's say that this thing passes and it becomes law in the state of Tennessee. If a woman goes out after the injunction has been in place to prevent her from having the abortion on her own, even if she goes out and has the abortion on her own, there's a stipulation in the bill that the woman and the medical official who performs the procedure can be punished both civilly, mainly financially, and even some other areas like maybe lose their license or the ability to practice, as well as criminal. Now, ultimately, I'm not the biggest in favor of having criminal charges for women who have abortions. But in this matter, if this bill passes and if it clears through all of the courts and the legal challenges, the woman will be violating the law. So, like I say, criminal charges ideally are not the best, but I wouldn't rule out taking it off the table, especially in a matter like this, because there needs to be some type of recourse or some type of redress if the woman violates a court order or an injunction. So will black men step up and work with these various different factions within the pro-life movement, whether it be political, spiritual, whatever the case may be? And I also want to mention this one last thing. I think I have the starting point of a political organizing for black men, particularly straight heterosexual black men, and even Bible-based black men in the United States on how we can start some kind of either political organizing and even maybe strategically at local levels, even maybe the beginning of a political party. I think that Canada has the blueprint for black men. And what I mean when I say that is that the Conservative Party in Canada, they're called the Progressive Conservatives. Now, the politics in Canada are a little bit different than the United States, okay? Canada, in general, is more to the left compared to America because America is going to lean a little bit more to the right compared to Canada. So for black men in the United States, we're not all 100% conservative, and the Republican Party doesn't necessarily work for us entirely right now, nor are the Democrats 100% against a number of the policies and the issues and the agenda that black men would like to see. There's some things I like the Republican Party for, and there's some things that I like the Democrats for. And the fact that Canada is more to the left than the United States, that would also include the Conservative Party in Canada is more to the left of the Republican Party here in the United States. And just as socialists and Marxists, because full disclosure, I am a non-violent revolution classical socialist or classical Marxist. Just as socialists and Marxists had an international strategy to their ideas and their philosophy and their agenda, I think black men also should have some kind of international strategy to our agenda, at least to borrow ideas and strategies and tactics from other people where there is a similarity or where those ideas or those tactics or those strategies can help us promote our cause and get our demands met. So in the United States, I think that black men should look to borrow ideas from the progressive conservatives in Canada and also look for any areas of cooperation with the progressive conservatives to get our demands met, because if we can only go so far with the Republican Party here stateside, we need to look at other conservative, high-minded conservative thinkers and high-minded conservative policies to get our demands met. Even if you look at the recent national election that Canada had in October of 2019. Now, the Trudeau administration promised to have some type of electoral reform in Canada, but they didn't follow through on that promise. Now, essentially, electoral reform in Canada is like changing the nature of the Electoral College in the United States, or it's the equivalent to, you know, aspects of like gerrymandering or redistricting in if you compared it to the United States. And since the Conservatives in the national election in Canada in 2019 received about, if I'm not mistaken, 38% of the popular vote, and the Liberal Party, which would be like the Democrats, received only about 36% of the popular vote in that election. And if Canada had electoral reform, the Conservatives would have had more seats in Parliament than the Liberals, and then the Progressive Conservatives would have had the advantage of making coalitions with the other smaller parties and independents in Canada, and the Conservatives would have had the advantage in forming the government in a parliamentary system and ultimately picking the Prime Minister. And if there would have been electoral reform in Canada, Andrew Scheer would have been the Prime Minister in Canada, not Justin Trudeau in re-election. But since the Liberals didn't put forward electoral reform, while they lost their outright majority, that still left them with enough of a plurality and therefore the advantage to where they made a coalition with the NDP, and that coalition was able to form a government, and that same coalition allowed Justin Trudeau to remain Prime Minister. Okay, so just like here in the United States, people talk about how Republicans and conservatives are against voting rights and they're against electoral reform and changing the Electoral College, that they're against the popular vote. Essentially, that's what the Liberals are doing. You know, not all, but a number of the Liberals are doing in Canada. They're against the popular vote and the will of the people, because we see that the progressive conservatives in Canada, at least in the last election, would have gotten more votes and would have had the plurality and would have had the advantage in forming the government, putting together a coalition, and selecting the Prime Minister. Okay, so I think that black men really need to look at the progressive conservatives in Canada and other conservative coalition partners in Canada, and we could use that as ideas with working with conservatives here in the United States and the Republican Party to get our demands met. So it basically could be almost kind of like a party within a party, that progressive conservative, because I'm progressive in some ways and I'm conservative in other ways. So I would consider myself to be a progressive conservative. And I think a lot of other fellow like-minded black men, heterosexual, straight black men, we're the same way. You know, ultimately, I'm a technocratic. Yes, I'm a classical Marxist, and I'm a classical socialist. but I also am a progressive conservative. And I think a lot of black men are the same way as far as being policy driven, technocratic, solution driven, having libertarian aspects or libertarian traits, and having both progressive and conservative principles. So I think that the progressive conservative path is the path for black men in the United States. We cannot fully rely upon the Democrats, but we also can't fully trust the Republicans. You know, so we form our own organization, and we may be somewhat housed or as a branch within the Republican Party, but we will work with both the Republicans and Democrats to get our demands met. This should be a bipartisan strategy. So let me know what you think. You know, leave any comments, and let's try to build this political organizing so we can get the policy changes that black men say that they want to happen. Okay. Let's continue to look at what's going on with this pro-life fight. Pay attention to what's going on within the states. Pay attention to what's going on with this bill in the state of Tennessee. Pay attention to what's happening in the courts and any legal challenges that may take place. Subscribe to this channel. Look at the other content that I've posted. Like this video, like this commentary if you like it, and let us begin to do the work. Shalom.